By request, we are looking at the weather painters in this deck build. Right now, painters are in a somewhat difficult place because they only have 6 main deck monsters, and not all of those monsters are even good. So there is not enough material for an effective pure painter build, demanding some form of hybridization. So let's get to the deck build by first looking at the existing painter support. The only tribute monster of the bunch, Aurora, has the versatility one was hoping for from Snow or Thunder in canvas searching, in placing from the hand, graveyard, or deck, but it only comes from a normal summon. Hip hip hooray to needless costs and restrictions, for it is a tribute monster. Its on-field continuous effect is certainly impressive, heavily limiting the ability of the opponent to change the scenery, as it were, for cards can certainly be a pain in the butt when you cannot target or destroy them. Unfortunately, Aurora is not the strongest hitter in the world, capping out at only 2200 attack, and while Thunder Canvas can protect her from battle, so to speak, the canvases lose her protection when she jumps out of the way. Therefore, the trick to the deck when running Aurora is keeping her alive to get any real value out of her effect. Fortunately, this strategy is accomplished from a battle perspective by combining Cloudy Canvas with another Weather Painter to have the attack of attacking monsters. Of course, this strategy only works as long as you maintain the monster advantage of the board, which can be difficult due to painters' general weak stats and one-for-one trading of boards with their canvases. In addition, there's so much removal in the game. Realistically, Aurora's days on the field are just numbered unless she jumps out of the way, which then exposes the back row to destruction and removal. Overall, I just do not see her as useful enough because of these workarounds. It's just too hard to keep her protected on the field so she can protect your canvases. Thunder is the merchant of sorts for the Painter tribe in functionality, with the talent to exchange a continuous spell or trap on the field for a canvas from the deck. Overall, this is the first of many questionable design decisions for weather painters in my eyes. For outside of ninjas, I can't think of an archetype off the top of my head that has had so many questionable design decisions for various effects in the archetype. For example, why couldn't Thunder get a canvas from the graveyard as well? Did anyone really think that was going to take away from Cloud's effect that much? Cloud would still have been used even if Thunder had this enhanced versatility. However, Thunder is a poor man's Snow in most situations. What a number of people like about Thunder is that its swap ability basically allows it, in a sense, to turn off continuous spell or trap floodgates. But for the most part, the value of limiting a floodgate to a single opponent's turn is not super appealing outside of maybe a card like Imperial Order. Looking at this effect sparks another potentially missed opportunity in design, whereas Thunder should have had the effect to swap either a continuous spell or trap for a canvas, the existing effect, or swap a canvas for a continuous card of the same type. For example, Thunder should have been able to swap a Draconoid Generator for a Rainy Canvas, or a Rainy Canvas for, say, a Solidarity. This effect would have given painters the unique ability to search continuous spells and traps through Thunder, producing a meaningful rationality to playing the archetype right now, but nope, that's not the case. Overall, at 1700 attack, Thunder is the highest no tribute hitter in the deck, but for the most part, it will not be able to hit over much against the current meta. However, despite these drawbacks, 3 copies are basically mandatory in my eyes due to its name and somewhat useful effect. The running theme of this build discussion once again rears its head, so what leads to the decision to only allow Sun to summon itself from the graveyard instead of any level 4 or lower weather painter? While Sun definitely has combo potential with a card like Cloud due to its revival effect, overall the effect is limited in value in part because the summons is not quick play. Again, another questionable design decision. It is a hard once per turn, nor is Sun summoned in attack position. Cue Homer Simpson and his trademark, woohoo. Overall, Sun can be rather useful for link summoning, but with Rainbow demanding 3 painters, in addition to at least one other painter in a link zone to have any real value, that value in link summoning only goes so far. Look, it's not Sun's fault he has such limited versatility, but it certainly hurts. I run 1 copy. A member of the frequently useful Weather Painter Triumvirate, Cloud is the chief recovery player for the deck when it comes to canvases, where most removal strategies against those canvases are thwarted by the multiplication of more canvases from the graveyard courtesy of Cloud. Cloud is important in facilitating combo setups with the deck, placing significant pressure on opponents to not address the canvases with removal, but instead forcing them to play around those cards. Well, that is what I would say about the effect if it did not have the huge flaw similar to that of Aurora, in that Cloud's attack is so low, the opponent can just bully her off the field one way or another, and then proceed to remove canvases. Once again, bad design decisions stop by to say hi. Overall, I would have preferred Cloud just to get a canvas from the graveyard when it was summoned. Cloud only really shines when you remove the canvases yourself with your own effects, which is certainly possible with either Thunder or Sun, but for the most part, such interaction can be inefficient. Again, despite the design frustrations, 3 copies due to the name and non-garbage effect. Sadly, the most depressing weather painter is Rain, which just has a dreadfully ineffective effect. So, okay, I special summon you, and I get the amazing advantage of placing a canvas face up from my hand. Yeah, not impressive at all. The only advantage of this effect is the ability to bypass the turn wait for activating the trap-based canvases. However, with so many other ways of putting these canvases face up on the field, and only one of the 2 trap-based canvases largely being even worth running in the first place, the impact of this effect is heavily limited. Overall, this effect will not be meaningful unless more quality trap-based canvases are released, which may never happen, for that is certainly a double-edged sword, and if given a choice, I think most painter players, heck, I think pretty much all painter players, would prefer a spell-based canvas over a trap-based canvas. Snow is the searcher of the archetype, with a normal summons leading to placing a free canvas, which can get past a card like Anti-Spell Fragrance, and is probably the most important painter monster in the archetype as a field position developer and a combo starter. The common play with Snow is searching her namesake home territory, Snowy Canvas, to later produce a second search of another painter card. However, outside of this search, Snow really does not do much outside being a name that can work with canvases, for her 0 attack does nothing, and while 2200 defense is definitely something, when you play defense, you're typically not going to win, especially in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Despite this lack of offensive capacity, the search is critically important to the functionality of the deck, and the fact that only 6 main deck monsters exist in the archetype, 3 copies are basically mandatory. Finally, Rainbow, the boss monster, is one of the best and worst boss monsters in the game. Its effect is sanely good, capable of flat negating and destroying up to 3 opponent card effects during a single turn, and it can also sacrifice itself to negate a special summon if properly link summoned. However, it is one of the worst boss monsters in the game because it is really a strong win more boss. Overall, 4 or 5 painters on the field is much better than Rainbow on the field with a single or even 2 negates. The simple fact is that outside of a soul charge, if you can get 5 painters on the field, you really should win without needing Rainbow. Keeping all of your painters also avoids the tragedy of Rainbow being kaiju. I run 2 copies, I guess just for the heck of it in a sense, but you really could just get away with 1, and even 1 is almost, as I said before, it's just kind of showboating in a sense. You'll rarely go into Rainbow. Moving on to the canvases, similar to its painter namesake, the Snowy Canvas gets the job done with regards to searching, allowing the addition of canvas or painter but only working a hard once per turn, understandably. Snow canvas is obviously important, but the hard once per turn condition does place questionable functionality on running 3 copies, with the level of searching weather painters have, as drawing multiple copies of snow is never really good, even with Thunder available for swapping that second copy with something else. To that end, I only run 2 copies of Snowy Canvas, while I'm sure most other Weather Painter players seem to favor 3 copies, but due to the searchability of the canvases, I like having the versatility of that single extra main deck spot for something else other than that third Snowy. The value of Cloudy Canvas is rather self-explanatory when one looks at the attack values for the painters. Yeah, not much to write home about. So canvases like Cloudy and Thunder are important for making some level of impact and headway against the opponent's field, unless you're going to rely on board clearing cards. The ability of the opponent's monster to attack directly is of limited value when it is going to be destroyed by battle 5 seconds later, because it now has such a low attack power, your painters can actually run it over, or when all of your painter monsters have run from the board clear, leaving the field vacant, so your opponent just swings at half the power they might otherwise swing with. Finally, there is a popular, more generic monster that likes to team up with this deck that definitely appreciates the capacity of having the opponent's monster attack power. To that end, due to the searchability of the deck, I run 1 copy of Cloudy. Sunny Canvas, in a sense, could be viewed as Casey at the bat for this archetype. It is one of those game breaker cards due to its lack of once per turn condition that can single handedly turn the duel around, or it will swing and miss in a comical fashion as you dead draw it. One Sunny Canvas can summon a large number of painters to the field to set up future domination with those painters and canvases, or even a rainbow with the ability to actually negate something. The common tribute target for Sunny Canvas is either a token or Sun himself, which can then later revive itself from the graveyard, basically paying for itself in a sense, especially if Cloud is on the field. However, because Sunny Canvas is a specialized canvas that can be completely dead when the field is not set up properly, the lack of any once per turn condition and a strong searchability of the canvases lead only 1 copy of Sunny to be needed. Rainy Canvas can be potentially useful as an anti-trap card if your field survives to the opponent's end phase, which, based on the stats of the painter monsters and the inability to protect with Thunder, is not something one should be expecting. Even then, with the painter's ability to use other canvases to jump out of the way, mitigating a lot of the threats from removal-based spells and traps the opponent might be using, Rainy Canvas's effect again comes off as win more in a sense. Obviously, one could combine this card with Anti-Spell Fragrance to attempt to lock the opponent down in a sense, but if you do not go first, this strategy can fall flat. But that is the strength of this card overall. That reality notwithstanding, I do run 1 copy, which can certainly lead one to infer what other card will be showing up later in this deck discussion. In my opinion, the best canvas available is Thunder. Thunder makes every painter in its sphere of influence basically a grand mole, i.e. battling a monster produces a non-targeting, non-destruction removal against that monster at the cost of losing the field presence of the painter temporarily. For the most part, Thunder provides a level of stall during the opponent's turn because few monsters can charge into a painter in Thunder's influence, thus making the attack futile because it'll just get bounced and the painter will be removed. So typically, Thunder is useful as long as the board presence is even or you're ahead on monsters. If you fall behind monsters, then your opponent may make certain sacrifices to try to breach your board, but typically you'll win out. So most of the time, if Thunder's on the field, your opponent's just going to kind of pass their battle phase. And during your turn, Thunder obviously beneficial because then you can throw your monsters into their monsters, creating some form of negative board change for them, while you'll get your monsters back in time to play defense during their turn. While Thunder is great for removing obstacles, the problem is that the effect does require time to compound advantage because you exchange initial field presence. Typically, you won't be able to get much damage in, even though you're bouncing all of the opponent's monsters back to their hand. Also, Thunder is a magnet for removal, for most opponents will be looking to get rid of it before any other canvases as fast as possible. However, due to the resource exchange involved with Thunder and the searchability of the canvases in general, I run 2 copies. Auroral Canvas is, in some respects, the painter's answer to Trickstar Reincarnation, allowing for the removal of key combo cards from the opponent's hand. However, Trickstar Reincarnation, it certainly is not. And overall, a vast majority of the time, Ghost Ogre or Ash Blossom will do a better job at addressing the issue. Auroral is another poorly designed card in that its effect activation condition is needlessly restrictive. There are some cute little combos one can do with Auroral Canvas, but none of those combos provide significant, consistent, positive impact for the deck. Overall, it almost seems like it's just better to run a card like Mind Crush over Auroral. Well, that concludes all of the existing archetype support. From a glance, what can the archetype do? What they have in monsters is a Searcher in Snow, a Swap or Exchange Searcher in Thunder. Usually, though, that swap is a losing trade. Typically, that continuous card you're losing for the canvas is better for your field. Situational Graveyard Canvas Recovery from Cloud, Self-Recursion in Sun, Place from the Hand from Rain. Boy, why couldn't that have been anything else? Shaky Canvas Protection in Aurora, and Universal Negation in Rainbow that is almost never useful. What they have in canvases, a Searcher in Snowy, an Attack Dropper in Cloudy that costs field presence, a 1-for-1 Recursion in Sunny, a Spell Trap Bouncer in Rainy that costs field presence, a Card Exchanger in Aurora that is commonly outclassed by various generic options, and a Monster Bouncer in the cost of field presence in Thunder. So what can be concluded? The big problems facing the painters are they have only one home run card in Rainbow, but it is resource intensive, easily outed by Kaijus or Solemn, and commonly has limited ammunition for its effect. They have no real archetype swarming capacity outside of Sunny Canvas, but that needs a tribute base, commonly some form of token generator, and needs graveyard fuel to draw from, so it's rarely good early in the duel. They have a general dependency on the canvas cards, but the canvas cards they're not really good, especially against a lot of other quality meta and rogue decks. They lack the overall general power on an individual monster basis, and probably the worst problem is that they do nothing against the opponent without losing tempo due to the banishment cost requirement for canvases. So for a good portion of the initial part of the duel, at best, all you can do is really even out against the opponent rather than make strong pluses or minus plays. Not surprisingly, the painters have a lot of problems. The 2 most common hybrids attempt to alleviate these problems are True Draco Masterpiece and Anti-Meta Stun. Masterpiece being one of the best cards in the game, and with natural access to continuous spells and traps, can cover a number of problems for this deck. But the concern with running Masterpiece or even Metatron versions of this deck is how much relevance do the painters even have in the build for a vast majority of the time. If Masterpiece does not hit the field, in a lot of those other Masterpiece builds I have seen, you lose, which basically makes the deck a Masterpiece or bust deck build, and if that is the case, there are a number of decks that are just better at tutoring Masterpiece to the field with better continuous spells and traps to support the deck, along with just better monsters to support Masterpiece. With regards to the anti-meta stun, painters do not provide basically any important interruption or limitation elements beyond maybe, depending on your definition, what Thunder's return to hand ability could qualify as. So the idea of using popular stun elements in the deck largely embodies the idea of slowing the opponent's deck until the soft pluses produced by the painters can finally produce some real advantage. However, again, there are just better decks to run these anti-meta elements in, so why bother running the painters to begin with? Basically, most hybrids are just hindered by the presence of the painters, rather than the painters working in synergy with those hybrid elements, producing improvement from both portions of the deck. That issue may be the most frustrating right now with the painters, for their effects are unique, but generally not powerful, as discussed earlier, so they really do not add anything when hybridized in a lot of other deck builds. Facing these issues, my goal with this deck build was to construct a deck where the painters actually had some synergy with the provided additional non-painter support. Starting with the remaining monsters, it is difficult to get away from Masterpiece when attempting to field the most competitive painter deck possible. So I run 3 copies of Masterpiece as the main deck boss monster. Also, I run only 1 copy of Hecatrice, which is understandable when seeing the rest of my deck, for searching Valhalla is not that essential. Finally, I run 2 copies of Eater of Millions because extra deck monsters are not super reliable, let's say, for this deck due to the nature of its monsters and the way it plays. Eater can also remove annoying monsters that may pester your field, and also lead the opponent to push for more radical ways of eliminating field presence, because few monsters can defeat Eater one-on-one on their own. Another option that I don't run but is somewhat valid is running Athena, but I feel Athena is too often a win more card in this type of deck, and definitely doesn't fit the theme of this particular build. For the spells, I run the aforementioned 2 copies of Valhalla. Valhalla is a solid card in this deck because the painters can't jump out of the way, so to speak, increasing the effectiveness of its use. You're not going to have monsters on the field. You get that special summons more often. However, hopefully, Masterpiece will be running the field for a good portion of the duel, rendering 3 copies of Valhalla a little excessive in my opinion. However, while overall there is no real problem with running 3 copies because most of the time Thunder can just swap out Valhalla for a canvas if it's additional and not needed, I value the deck spot for another card rather than the 3rd copy. I run 1 copy of Raigeki and 1 copy of Upstart Goblin for the obvious field removal and somewhat increased speed. Finally, I run 2 copies of Scapegoat for field protection when painters need to jump out of the way of bigger monsters, or field clearance, which can happen a lot, and I need some form of shield for direct attack. Also, Scapegoat can be utilized for link summoning, as well as by Sun Canvas for painter graveyard recursion spam, but this does not occur very often. For the traps, seeing that the painters can leave the field temporarily but are weak and cannot easily swarm, that creates a difficult environment where it is easy for the painters to fall behind in field control and field power, even with the potential of Masterpiece. So my philosophy is, not surprisingly, to take advantage of the painter's ability with their canvases by running a lot of board clearing traps. 3 copies of Torrential Tribute and 3 copies of Needle Sealing lead the way, for it is ridiculously easy to activate Needle Sealing in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! These field clearers provide immediate negatives for the opponent rather than the slow, soft negatives that the painters produce via cards like Thunder and Cloudy. I also like running the aforementioned 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance, for this deck is not spell heavy, and the painters can sidestep Fragrance's limitation with their placing canvas ability. Also, Anti-Spell can significantly reduce the comeback potential of the opponent after a board clear. Finally, I run 1 copy of Skill Drain and 1 copy of Solemn Judgment. These choices are rather self-explanatory. The canvases apply effects to the painters, so anytime you jump a painter out of the way, so to speak, you can still receive the corresponding effect of that canvas, limiting the detriment of skill drain to you, and it can be cleared by Masterpiece summoning or reviving Sun from the graveyard. Judgment is just that annoying, almost universal negation that I feel, unless you're running like an FTK, OTK deck, probably should be in your deck. Another option is Macrocosmos, because of the lack of graveyard activity in the deck, but I find Macro as a side deck choice more than a main deck choice. For the extra deck, Other than a couple of copies of Rainbow, basically anything goes with regards to rank 3 or general link monsters. I run one number 30 Acid Golem of Destruction, one number 47 Nightmare Shark, one Phantom Knights of Breaksword, one Mechquipped Angineer, one Wind-Up Zenmaines, the two aforementioned Rainbows, one Decode Talker, one the World Chalice Priestess, one Proxy Dragon, two Underclock Takers, and three Link Spiders. Obviously, the Link Spiders can be Link Karibo, but 3 Link Karibo can be a little pricey. Overall, the problem with Weather Painters is the archetype is just bad for the general effects of the monsters are not impactful, and the canvases, that one-for-one trading thing, it's just too slow right now in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Without some serious backup, and that's where the board clears come in with the deck build. Also, I didn't previously mention this, but just the terrible varied attribute assignment, of course, does the deck no favors. I love when Konami designs an archetype where the main deck monsters have a number of scattered attributes for, I guess, for thematic flavor, but the problem is this puts a needless crutch on the deck, eliminating the effective utilization of generic attribute support cards. Note to Konami, how about some good varied attribute generic support to help these types of decks out a bit for a card like Elemental Burst? Yeah, nobody really runs that type of card anymore. Despite all of these limitations, this build can do some things when not facing down too much field negation due to the board clears that augment the soft pluses of the painter, and of course, the field control provided by Masterpiece. Well, that is my Weather Painter deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.